I'm Spooner Oldham. How y'all today?
Well, sir, how are you? Can you just kind of give us an overview of your studio work and your songwriting work?
Well, let's see how to give an overview of my songwriting studio work. When I was in high school, Rick Hall had this little studio we put over on Wilson Dam Road, former tobacco warehouse, I was told. I don't know anything about that, but what I do know is he had an organ in there, microphones and a recorder, and he was mostly at that time doing songwriting demos for people. He was song publisher was really the idea, I think. And so there came a moment when I was asked to come over there, and I was a teenager. Would I come over and put organ on Arthur Alexander song, You Better Move On, which I did. Me and Sandy Posey, the singer, and Herschel Wigginton, background singer, now in Nashville, and a Jerry, someone from Nashville. We shared one microphone and overdub on that song, and I think it came out and did well, and helped get this studio we're in now built. But so that I was starting to up over the city drugstore, Spar Music, it was called. It was a song publishing company, but it had an acoustic piano, a little recording room with a panel like a radio station. I'd never been in one that, looked like a recording studio, a little bitty place. But so, and Dan Penn was the only artist, and he had just moved up from Vernon, Alabama, his hometown, and he and Linda, his wife of terrible with dates, 56 years or something. They just moved up here to Florence, and so I knew Dan Penn had written a song that became a hit called "Is a Bluebird Blue" that Conway Twitty had a record. So, and I'm starting to get interested in the songwriting in my basement in my mom and dad's house. I asked him, could I put a upright piano down there? Okay, sure. Me and Bill Patton, my friend, we moved the piano down the stairs, and we got it down there and realized that it wouldn't fit in the door. It was too big to go sideways. So I went upstairs and asked my mom and dad, could I chip away a few concrete block pieces and get that piano in there? Okay, it's still missing the blocks there, but so I'd go down there and write little teenage puppy love songs and stick them in the piano bench and not play them to anybody except my sister Judy sang some. We did a couple weddings back then, and I haven't got those songs back out since, but I had the notion that I'd like to write songs and maybe I could do it. And then Dan and he moved up here and I got with him, and we wrote one night to try to see if we had chemical togetherness, whatever. Wrote something, but neither one of us knows what it was, and we didn't capture it, but we continued writing together, and eventually I think Rick Hall called me one day, said, here at Fame, Dan Penn just signed, I think it's a 2-year contract. What would you need to do the same thing? I'd like to have y'all here as songwriters. And I said, well, I'm living with my parents. I'm a teenager. I smoke cigarettes. I got a car. It needs gas. I need $25 a week. Sign, That's what I did. But, so it was wonderful because we had access to these nice facilities, good sound. So Dan and I would write here. He played acoustic guitar, sings. I'd get on one of the keyboards. piano usually. And we finish the song and just play it once or twice, record it, little tape. And within a week or two, the band would actually do a proper demo of the song, get all of us together, which is usually Roger Hawkins, Jimmy Johnson, Junior Lowe, David Hood a little later, Perry Thompson sometime, and then we'd do a proper demo. And I think that stuff's come out on, I saw it in the lobby. There was some re-releases or whatever they call it. This Came from Fame, and English company released a lot of those demos, I think. But that's sort of, and then I played in bands at college, fraternity parties when I was a teenager. And I played so many of them, I had it down pat. We'd start down the road. Like if you go into Ole Miss, my mindset was like, well, they're going to be dressed up, suits and ties, formal, almost formal attitude. If you go to Auburn, they got a certain way. You go to Alabama, they, be careful with beer on the floor because you might get electrocuted and, cables running everywhere. And so it was all fun, though. They all had a good time at all those schools. So that was sort of the mixed mash of my interest at the beginning, It just continued the same old, same old.
Going back to spar music, can you talk about that a little bit? Like, what was it? Were you guys just hanging out there, or were you working when you were there?
Can they hear your questions when I answer?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit, yeah, good. 'Cause to answer that question is all the above. It was a place you were allowed to hang out and sit around and look at the newspaper or whatever and talk or whatever. There was no specific goings on every day. But Spar was actually a song publishing company, that name. I don't know where it came from, but so there was, how do I say it, a lot of wannabe songwriters, producers, engineers, everybody, that thing that goes on with people like that. You just looking for something to do and trying to figure out how to do it. And so in that conglomeration of things, there was a mutual thing about music, I think. Some of us want to be songwriters, some of them want to be recording engineers. And, I start naming lists, it's probably the top 10 category of world-class people, so I'm not going to go there, but, yeah.
And
But it was sparsely furnished, that place. It was like a sofa and a chair and nothing there. Empty rooms back there. Sometimes people would sleep there. I never did, I don't think, but somebody come in from out of town to a pallet down. It was a pretty bizarre thing, really, because the one thing that they did have going on a regular basis was at Spar was Tom Stafford, the head honcho. They had a little record label called Earth Records, and Dan Penn was the only artist on the label. So that was part of the formula to get him little 45 records out. And then at Spar Music up over the drugstore that no longer exists, it's gone, but Tom Stafford said to me one day, I think I met a guy, he works at the Sheffield Hotel, or somewhere in Sheffield Hotel, and he's what do you call it? There's a word for it. Bellhop, maybe. And I think he's written a hit song, and I had never heard that terminology in the shows because there really wasn't a lot of hits going on. And so it's an interesting thought. He thinks that, and so later I met Arthur, up there Spar and heard his song. I see what you're saying, yeah. But Arthur, he didn't play an instrument, but he wrote the songs and sang. So David Briggs, my other keyboard player from Killen, Alabama, where we did an 8th grade recital together on the duets on the piano. We'd pay $10 a week, one lesson a week, first, second, third grade piano for me. We had to do a duet in assembly program, and so we did that, But so David would sit down with Arthur, and I would sit down with Arthur at the piano. So it makes you wonder how the song got together, but you just can hear it as a player. You just sort of know where to go sometimes. So I do a little demo. And so I was invited to go to, after Better Move On came out, it was a hit. And then about simultaneously, an album was being recorded on Arthur in Nashville. Noel Ball had signed him to Dot Records. And so I watched Floyd Kramer do my part on the record, All they say, what is it? It's a form of flattery, I guess. Somebody does what you do. But I was really young, teenager, When all that started blossoming around me, I think what really set me on fire is the possibilities of doing something in music was the Beatles and Rolling Stones started covering Arthur's songs, and so I thought, what a small world this can be, music travel fast. That became an obsessive thought, it's quick. You don't have to wait for results too long. So that moved me, it's like an instantaneous reaction in me. But so that took away all other thoughts, just do it.
Did Arthur make money from?
I don't know. I know. I played on his last album in Nashville, and I went to the hotel room and chatted with him, and he was driving a van for senior citizens in Cleveland, Ohio, and he was enjoying himself, I never did know if he did well with his money or how that worked. I never knew. I still don't know.
Can you talk about some of the early bands you were in?
Yeah, I was in a band called Hollis Dixon and the Keynotes here in the Florence, Shoals area. It was Donnie Fritz on drums, Raymond on bass, worked with the utility department, Jimmy Johnson on guitar. I was on an electric piano, and Hollis Dixon was a singer. Donnie Strigley was a guitarist. And we played a lot of fraternity parties. We had a booking agency, Tommy Couch. He kept us booked at Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss, Mississippi State College for one, and other places, And then another band I was in as a teenager was, we called it the Upsetters in the beginning, and we learned that Little Richard had a band called the Upsetters, so we dropped that and changed it to Tempest. And we'd do like these country club dress-up affairs. Used to be a place called Sky Park out Killen there on the river, and they'd have meals and music, and they'd dress up and go dancing. We'd play those things, and that was Billy Scott on sax, Jimmy Lovell on a guitar, Raymond Davis on bass, Charles Springer on drums, and I'm doing the piano. So, and I'm trying to think. In the very first band, we didn't really call it a band, it was like a trio. Me and my cousin, Bruce Oldham, played guitar, and I was learning to play mandolin. So, and Ronald English was singing, and we do a little trio locally. And back then, there was a lot of, the way you were heard as a music person was basically talent shows. They don't do that much anymore, but schools would have talent shows and $25 prize, and that wasn't the goal. It was just, I met a lot of people in those talent shows. And I can hardly stand the thoughts of playing one now. I won't play one now, but back then it was fun, you know, because it's starting out. I don't even understand the concept of talent shows anymore.
So, can you tell us about some of the session work that you did here, and who the members of the rhythm section were when you started, and then how it changed by the time you were finished?
Trying to think. Some of the earlier recordings was that became hits that easy enough to recall was like Jimmy Hughes, Steal Away. And I think that was one of Rick Call's finds, you know, well, okay, that band was, it's a good question. Roger Hawkins, I think, on drums. Jimmy Johnson on guitar. Probably Junior Lowe on bass. What's that lead? Bass guitar. John. Terry Thompson on the guitarist. Of course, it's tough to go naming this stuff because I can name you the songs, but to remember the horn players, each session would be different horn players. Some of them were local, some of them were from Memphis. Singers background singers were usually from here, sometimes from Nashville. And then oddly, the next record I remember was Clarence Carter, Slip Away. And those, I think they're the same band. But those bands, you know, they stayed together 3 or 4 years, and then it became a whole different section. I moved to Memphis, and well, I'll tell that story because I don't think it's ever been told. Barry Beckett, well, another song I could hear was a song Dan Penn I wrote called I'm Your Puppet. And I played an organ, and Barry Beckett, no, I'm sorry, I played piano, and Barry Beckett played organ. So Barry Beckett had come up here from Pensacola, Florida, with Papa Don Schroeder, a record producer, radio guy in Pensacola. And I think he maybe owned a club or something. I think Barry played in that club. And so we did that. I met Barry, and he went back to Pensacola. And then a few weeks later, he and I went over to this little market next door. It's this drugstore now, CVS drugstore, but back then it was a little mini market or something. Went over to get a soda pop, and on the way back, he says to me, Spooner, you think I could get any session work if I moved up here? And Dan Penn, my writing buddy, had moved to Memphis a year prior to me going to Memphis, with Chip Moman, who just built this American studio. And so Barry says, you think I get the session work? I said, well, I'm sure you can do whatever I've been doing. An Edison light bulb went off my head. I was trying to figure a way to be true to Fame and Rick and not just take off. have a replacement sort of. So that was my thinking, and he did do that. And he came down and had a great career in the Shoals, but and then I went on to Memphis, and well, the way that happened is just Moment one day, he's playing guitar on Aretha Franklin sessions. After a couple of songs here at Fame, we went to New York and finished the album. And in the hallway one day, we're taking a break, just he and I, and he peeled out his wallet, 5 $100 bills. Said, "Why don't you come to Memphis and write with me and Dan?" Okay. And easy sell, you know. So that's how I ended up basically in Memphis a couple of years.
But you didn't bail on Rick Hall. You waited till he got Barry Beckett in.
Yeah, he didn't know nobody. Like I said, I don't think anybody knows that story, but that's really what happened. However, that's how the chips fell, you know. Rick probably never knew any of that. I don't know. I never talked with him about that stuff. Didn't talk to Rick about anything.
Do you think
We went to,
anybody did?
huh?
Do you think anybody did?
I don't know. I don't know.
He was a few years older than y'all, maybe.
Yeah, a few years older than I was. I don't know how much, but I could look to him more as a, you know, somebody on my same age level, but also I could look at him more as a fatherly kind of figure, I guess. And he was more entrepreneurial spirit than I ever dreamed about being at his age, you know, wanting to build a facility of world-class standards, you know, and do it well. So he was intentional on pulling it off, you know, from the get-go. And he's a tenacious worker. To recall was that if you came in here with you were a record producer or a label owner or anyone, you brought a band or a singer in here, hired us to play, you can count on Rick Hall being the last man standing. He would not bail ship for any reason. He's gonna stay there till you get your work done, you know, come hell or high water.
Definitely want to talk about your time in Memphis and your time in California. One song that you recorded in Shoals that you did not record here was "When a Man Loves a Woman." Can you tell us about how you ended up as a Fame guy playing a session at another studio in town?
Yeah, I can tell a story about Percy. What I heard from my view, I'm just going to tell my viewpoint. Everybody's got a different story, but my story is I get a call. Would I come play a recording session of this new studio we're just opening up? Of course, I think I knew Quinn. I knew Marlon Green, who were the harbingers of the building. So they said it's the guy's first recording session, a record, and I think it's the first recording in the studio. So that was, you know, what they said to me on the phone. Sure, I'll be there. What day, what time, blah, blah, blah. And I showed up, and there was this red, shiny organ. You know, you're used to seeing these Hammond wooden, big old heavy things in studios. And so I thought, well, that's odd. I look at it, never seen one. And made in Italy, Farfisa. And it had a big old black Ampeg amplifier over here, about knee high. Turn the power on, the red light comes on. Turn the power on the organ, red light comes on. Volume up. It sounded like it had like 2 buttons. One was called a multi-tone booster, and the other, I forget what it's called. You didn't have much choices of sound. 2 buttons. So I hit that first button, sounded like a thousand screaming bumblebees, worst sound I've heard in my life, you know, terrible. I thought, well, I can see this guy, this is gonna be a solo session, no way around it, I don't think. I can't use that. Push the other button and it's the sound we hear on When a Man Loves a Woman, the recording, and my heart just felt good about it, you know, because I went from this screaming bumblebee sound to nice organ sound. That made my day brighter already. And then Percy, he's out there in the middle of the floor, stand up to a microphone. Roger Hawkins over here on drums and Junior Lowe on bass, and that was that day's session. They added horns and voices later, but Jimmy Johnson, I think, was back there on the 8-track board. And the way we knew when it was time to record, I think a little red light would come on the wall. And my memory, I can't tell you how long it took, but I'm guessing not over 15 minutes, you know, maximum. You know, so that's the way and I went out in the lobby, look at a Billboard magazine after we finished, and it had a full-page ad, which are probably expensive advertisements for. Said the Beatles are coming. I never heard of the Beatles, and no one else had. You know, that's that day when I remember those two things. Percy standing up there singing his heart out. We playing the best we could, and the Beatles are coming. You know.
Is it true that they put out the wrong tape on the single of When a Man Loves a Woman?
Well, the only thing I heard about wrong takes, yeah, I think I know where you're going with that. Because I had a letter writing frenzy about it to New York Musicians Union, explaining what I thought had happened and trying to get correct people paid and so forth. And anyway, the story I hear, and I think it's true probably, they added the local horn players, Jack Beck and other names, section. They put it on a recording. And I hear that they sent it to New York, Atlantic Records, Jerry Works, said, there's one note on the end that's out of tune, would you do that again? So I think replaced that section, horn section, with the Memphis horn players. I was there that day, I saw them do this. I didn't know the other thing had happened, matter of fact. So what happened, I hear that in the end result, they used the wrong recording, which was the first one. So, you know, so that's all I know.
It's not the Memphis Horns on the...
Right, they're on the contract, they're getting paid for the use fees. If you see a commercial, that they're getting paid. But like I said, I wrote letters. I don't think it matters. You know, your name's got to be on the form to get paid. It's all good. Good and bad.
So you moved up to Memphis to join Dan Penn. Can you talk about your time in Memphis, what you did there, and then how you ended up moving from there to California?
Yeah, I moved to Memphis just to, you know, have a new songwriting partner that I was used to, and also I was, you know, the session work was available as a keyboard player at that time, so I was doing all the whatever work. The one record I hear we did, I still like, and it's still on the airwaves, is B.J. Thomas, I Just Can't Help Believing. But so I remember when I lived in Shoals, Jimmy Johnson, Roger Hawkins, David Hood, and I were going through Memphis. And like I said, we stopped by American Studio, and Dan Penn played it. He always wanted to produce records, which he started doing in Memphis. And we heard this recording of the band track of The Letter by the Box Tops, and we all left. I remember they saying, yeah, they think that's a hit, you know. But of course, he added strings and voices after we left later, and it did become a #1 record. But so then I went back, moved to Memphis, and he and I wrote that follow-up, Cry Like a Baby. So that was one of my introductions to Memphis, you know, that experience. So things were going along just well, and did that a couple of years, signed with Chip's publishing company in a couple of years, and had some Sweet Inspiration was one song that came out of that time, and Dan and I wrote that song, and I was playing. Dan had bought like a little, I say cheap Fender guitar, like a Mustang or Squire, I don't know. But the day the Sweet Inspiration was recorded, I wasn't really on the session that day. I don't know if I was just getting moved in, but next door there was an office with access to the office, and I heard the song that they were trying to do, and I said to Dan, maybe you should try to write them a song. What do you think? He said, we went upstairs and wrote the song, brought it down to them. They loved it. And I think Dan tells a story that some of the band was there, some of the producers, the engineers had gone to dinner. So played it to the girls. They liked it, started singing it immediately. And some of the band was there. And Dan pushed record. So when Tom Dow, the engineer, came back, he said, Tom, I didn't change anything. I didn't run the tape back, but I just pushed go. Didn't change any buttons. So that's the way and I played guitar on it because that's the way we wrote the song. I didn't have a piano up there. And I played it to Reggie Young, great guitarist friend, and he said, play it again. Would you play that for me again? Won't you play it? So I did, you know. One of my only guitar playing on a record stories. But so during that experience in Memphis, I lived there by myself, bought first new car, bought a house. Then I met Karen down here in the Shoals. She was visiting from Florida. Her best friend, Glenda, and my good friend, Grady, were dating, and they were engaged to be married. So I think Karen and I beat their marriage by like a week. And we immediately moved to Los Angeles, which I had been getting calls about Los Angeles. They bought this building from Mike Curb, called Sidewalk Production, a little old building, and they want to put a recording studio in there, and they're getting a band together. Alamos has sold Memphis concept, house band, different singers. I wasn't really interested first, but they kept calling and saying Emery Gordy Jr. is going to be the bass player. He's now married to Patty Loveless, but he's from Atlanta, and Joe Wilson from Atlanta. Richard Bennett, a teenage guitarist, lived in Los Angeles. That's going to be the house band, and you could have piano and organ. So finally, I made a little deal where I could get a weekly salary and also allowed to play anywhere in town, no penalties, or, no reservation. So I did all that. I got to, essentially my success in Los Angeles I contributed a lot to a friend of mine, Chris Etheridge, who was in a band called Flying Burrito Brothers, and they were breaking up and doing solo albums amongst them, Graham Parsons. And so I'd play on their albums, and then some of the Bird stuff were breaking up. They were doing individual albums, so I was in on that. And then Terry Melcher, who had been producing Power Generators and stuff, and the Birds, and he started hiring me to do whatever he was producing. So all of a sudden, I'm loaded down with things to do, and just. But I think Chris Etheridge introduced me immediately to these Southern California rock, pop, rock and roll people, and they started. I think it's a big part of surviving in this industry is people gotta like you. I mean, so I think they like me and I like them, and it's, one thing leads to another. So we bought a house in Glendale. First place we lived, MacArthur Park, got a little apartment, and the powers that be, the studio owners, they said, "Well, you living over there at MacArthur? That's a drug dealing park neighborhood, and it was scared for you, and you need to get out of there." And so I had never knew it was happening there, wasn't bothered by it. So, but I moved, and so I lived in Burbank a while, apartment, met Freddie Weller there. He and I started writing some country songs, like one of those was Lonely Women Make Good Lovers. And he had 3 or 4 #1 country records as an artist singer, so he and I were writing together, so that was going on in California. And so one year we got 3 songwriting awards at BMI in Nashville while I was living out there. But a funny story about Freddie, he told me he was with the Power Generators band in Europe at the time his record came out. Games People Play that Joe South had written. He said, somebody told him, Freddie, you got like a #1 country record in the United States. He said, really? I didn't know that. He said, I guess I ought to quit this band. So he did. Became a solo artist, But a lot of good things, a lot of good stories in California. And
Did you know Harry Nelson out there?
Harry Nilsson?
Yeah.
I played on one song, but I didn't see him. It was like an overdub. I think it's called A Bullet or something. And I'm trying to remember who produced that. But Terry Melcher, he's a good friend, and he was Doris Day's son, which I never met her, but he's just a regular guy around me. We just, regular thing. But we did get wrapped up in that. He did get wrapped up in that Charles Manson story. What I read is he and a engineering friend of his went to the ranch out there where Manson and his gangs lived, and I guess they'd heard stories about him singing and writing songs and wanted an audition, blah, blah, blah. And they took a little truck out there with a recorder and engineer. I don't really know much about it, except I understand that Terry didn't want to sign him to any kind of contract after that. And I think Charles Manson got peeved and was out to kill him. Therefore, he went to that house where these people were murdered, Sharon Tate, and that's the house he lived in prior, but he had moved, but they didn't know it. So the story goes that his people went back to Charles Manson and said, well, he's not living there anymore. We'll kill him anyway. They're pigs. So they went back, and so Terry was all of a sudden, I think a trial was coming up, and he wanted to sort of not be around him. They had went up to him at California cabinet. I asked somebody, "What's he doing up there?" He said, "Well, he sits in the corner with sunglasses and a pistol in his hand most of the time, scared."
I would be.
You know, yeah.
So it was during this time that you made your solo album. Can you talk about your solo album?
Well, yeah. So when I first moved to California, this studio was being put together, and we, the band, helped put together. We'd test mics and put up baffles, these things that separate sound, and trying to get everything running. You know, it was a new installation, so to speak. And so once we got everything set up, and we look around at each other, you know, I guess they think, well, he's written a few songs and he can sing a little bit or plays a little bit. Maybe we should do something with you. I said, oh, well, we can try, you know, and do whatever. So it was like you know, it was a necessity that we do something, play some music, write some songs, and so I was because I was there, you know, and so that's the way that happened. Really, just I wasn't really trying to do an album, but it just became one, you know.
And so now, several decades later, you're working on your follow-up?
I want to do. I want to finish an album this year. I've started on it, but it's bits and pieces. I've got demos. I think I may overdub some instruments on. I've got some recordings on 1-inch tape. I got a Baker tape and convert it so I can look at it. And it's just work to be done. But yeah, I'd like before the end of the year have an album out. And I'm like Grandma Moses was one of my inspirations. She was 80 when she became famous as a artist painting. I may not become famous as an artist, but at least that's my motivation, to be like her, you know.
I think you might already be famous.
Well, that's what people say but yeah, in certain arenas, yeah, famous is.
So you did the Liberace covers album while you were out there?
Who?
You played on a Liberace?
I played on Liberace album, and that was fun. What it was the people that owned the studio managed Liberace. So we're going to do an album in that studio. Liberace's going to do an album. So it was a cover song. I brought it out here one day and showed it to Linda Hall. That's called A Brand New Me, and it's he did songs that were hits, you know, at the time. And so the way it worked was we put the rhythm section. We'd record the song, me and the band, and then a week or two later, he brought an old 1934 concert Grand Steinway into the building and played it. He said any of the band or wives or whatever wanted to come watch or feel free. We all went while he did his part. We'd already done our part. So I remember he was there with jeans, street clothes, just like regular folks, you know, talked like regular folks. He wasn't that guy that we see on TV, you know, flamboyant costumes. He had a guy with him, probably his bodyguard, boyfriend, I don't know. He didn't say anything, but he was nice. And so Karen, my wife, had cooked a chocolate cake, I think. He said, I'm on a diet, watermelon diet. He said, but I want to have some of that cake, you know. But he was just, and after he finished the album, Ed Cobb, the record producer, called my house and said, Lee said you could have that piano for $1,200 if you want it. And I still get bad vibes from my wife when I missed it because I said, I just moved here, bought a house. I can't afford it. I appreciate the thought, and I told my wife I'd have to build another room with that big old piano. I don't want to share my living room with that piano, you know. Anyway, that's what, I don't think I ever saw him again. But one funny story I heard right off the bat when I moved to California, and they were associated with Liberace, the studio owners, was that IRS called him on some clothing costs. And as I understand, the statute sort of reads like, well, it's something you wouldn't wear on the street that qualifies for a deduction. So what he did, he put on one of those outfits, went up to the IRS office, said, "Would you wear this?" Smart man.
On the other end of the spectrum of artists that you've worked with, you toured with Bob Dylan,
Yeah.
came back here. Can you talk about that a little bit?
The Bob Dylan tour was like 1980, 81. And I was living in Nashville at the time. Wallace Lane. Karen was pregnant, I think, with Roxanne, her daughter, now 45. Well, okay, and Karen's getting nervous about me being in Nashville. My thoughts was I had no particular plan when I moved to Nashville. Dan, my writing buddy, had moved there, but I thought, well, maybe I get up there and write some songs with him. But I didn't have a plan or a job. So after a few weeks, and I also didn't want to be ideally you'd be a first call session, country session guy. Is that what you want? No, I don't want that. So I write maybe once a month. So Karen was getting nervous. She said, maybe you ought to get a job at McDonald's or 7-Eleven or something. I said, oh, don't worry, it's going to be all right. And Bob Dylan called me and wanted to do a tour, and I said yes. And so we rehearsed out in Los Angeles several weeks, several days. I mean, I thought it was going to be spontaneous, top of the house, be ready for anything, he's likely to do anything at any time, but we were well rehearsed, best rehearsed band in the world, I'm sure, several days. But I think he was learning his songs he'd written with a band, so I understand it takes time to feel natural about new stuff. And then I remember the first gig we did was Warfield Theater in San Francisco. Bill Graham, he's a popular music promoter. He had renovated this theater, Warfield Theater, and it had been shut down. Well, we were grand opening on it. And Bob was sold out 2 weeks before we got out of the van. But we rode up the first day in a van, all the band and singers. And I'm looking out the window, and there's like 21-year-olds with posters, like reminded me of the 60s photograph, I know they're protesting something, but what is it? I'm trying to read through the tinted windows, and I guess what it was it seemed to me like they were protesting his move from Judaism to Christianity. I guess is what that is. So and then another odd thing about theater would be full. Okay, we were playing the first song, and everybody playing good, singing good, all going well. And the end of the song is, yeah, and the other half, boo, boo, boo. I've never been booed in my life before. Didn't know what that's about, but I don't. It's either religion or it wasn't what they wanted to hear. I want to hear whatever, like a Rolling Stone or whatever. He wasn't going to do any of that. It was all gospel Christian music, So that was funny. But after about 3 days, they had all bought their tickets, protested, and then it sort of calmed down the rest of the tour, But we we played the States, a lot of states, and Toronto, I know we did a full-fledged 3-camera show. They're gonna do a video, and so some of the management or accounting came to me one day and said, the girls are gonna wear all black tonight, and you guys wear black slack. I said, I don't have any, and I'm not getting any, unless somebody pays for them. So I got $60 to go get a pair of black slacks, and showed up that night. And, I think that film just actually came out recently, because I'd never seen or heard of it. But it was just our show, that we did that whole tour.
Did you have any influence on him coming back here to record?
No, I didn't know he was here. The story of Bob Dylan, his recording in the Shoals, was, as I understand it, he recorded an album at the new, later version of Muscle Shoals Sound Studio. Slow Train Coming that Barry Beckett and Jerry Wexler produced. I had nothing to do with that. It became a hit. Okay, and then when I got out Los Angeles to rehearse for a tour, he had just been writing these songs that became a saved album. But all the thing I know is I remember just somebody had booked a studio over there, and we rolled up in a bus or whatever and spent about 3 days, recorded the album that we were already doing on the tour. So yeah, I don't really know how that came to be. I don't think I had anything to do with it. I was just a hired hand,
I don't think we got time for 2 more.
Yeah, I got an hour now, so 2 more is fine.
We got a tape.
We don't have to cut, but yeah, I would
We
pick your
gotta
list.
be out here about 2.
Oh, yeah.
Is that right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I would do a couple more maybe.
Okay. What advice would you give aspiring musicians and songwriters?
have fun with what you're doing, or get out of the business, or get another job. It's that simple to me. It's no in between. Just if you aren't having fun, don't do it.
What about for songwriting in particular? Like, what do you do to get inspired to write songs?
Oh, that's a deep question, because it's so flexible. The motivation to write a song is so flexible. It could be when I walk out today out there and see a car painted green or something. You don't know where it's come from. You got to be. The way I tell about my songwriting, I think, is some days I'm receptive to want to be a songwriter or to write a song. And that day, my antenna's right up here. Other days, I'm a little tired. I don't want to think. It comes way down, and I probably won't get many ideas. And then there's other days I shut down intentionally. I don't want any part of it. Don't talk to me about song. Don't want to think about it. So that's the 3 areas I operate in. It's 0, 50%, and 100%. But, you never know where inspiration is going to come from as a writer. I like what Dan Penn tells. He's told me these young writers in Nashville said, Dad, how do you write a song? Do you write from personal experience or where do you start? He said, just make something up. I like that answer.
So his songs are not autobiographical.
It could be that, it could be a true story.
How would you define or describe the Muscle Shoals sound, and how do you see yourself fitting into that legacy?
Well, I don't know. It's just basically Muscle Shoals sound to me is anything that comes out of this area. It could change daily. I don't think it has to be one thing. It remains to be seen what it is my answer. I don't want it to have an answer. I won't give an answer.
What are some of the younger bands that you really like, or younger artists from around here that you think that you're excited about?
Well, it's, always some of the, I've been, my cousin, Mark Norman, our first cousin, he's met a lot of these younger artists, and he and I have been writing with some, Taylor Grace, and there's some of these young girls that are trying and doing, and who knows, hopefully they'll do good. And it's the same old story. Anybody wants to do well, just got to keep trying. And of course, there's some artists doing well here I don't even need to talk about, because they got their own ship out at sea and doing well. But I hope the youngsters find a love for it and a way to get motivated and a way to explore the world that the music leads them to, if they get an opportunity to get in a studio like this and really display their wares well, because it can be a tough business, really tough.
That's all I got.
Final question, Abraham, you got any?
You got anything you want to ask?
I was just hearing you talk, like, where did you grow up? Like, what community?
I grew up all over the place, but first and second grade at Whedon Heights. And then later, my parents moved to Center Star, out in the country. I don't know if you know where it is, past Killen. I went to Lauderdale County High School in Rogersville. I live in Rogersville now 34 years. But that's pretty much it locally.